Earlier today, you may have seen our friend Steve Bowling over at Good Vibes Gaming post his preview of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom after getting a chance to spend nearly 2 hours with it at a recent press event. If you haven't seen that preview yet, you should definitely check it out. There is a link in the description. After posting, they were kind enough to provide us with their direct feed capture, allowing us to finally have a clean source with which to dive into the technical makeup of this game. Up until now, our footage has been restricted to heavily compressed YouTube video, which can make testing frame rates and pixel counting resolution a bit less accurate. This footage is our first uncompressed look at this game, so let's see how it holds up. A quick refresher on Breath of the Wild, since it has been a while since 2017, and Tears of the Kingdom runs on an evolution of that same engine. Breath of the Wild targeted 30 frames per second in both docked and handheld configuration. At launch, some caching issues could cause extended frame rate drops in select areas, but these have largely been patched out at this point. If you're playing the Switch version of Breath of the Wild today, you'll likely only encounter extended frame rate drops around the Great Deku Tree, while areas like Faron and Kakariko Village, which used to cause problems, now run smoothly. As for resolution, Breath of the Wild targeted 900p docked and 720p handheld. Both of these were technically dynamic, but the dynamic settings were not particularly aggressive, and the vast majority of playtime was spent at those target resolutions. Beyond the raw numbers, Breath of the Wild employed high-quality ambient occlusion, multiple reflection systems for both near and far real-time reflections, and of course an extremely impressive foliage system. More than 6 years later, it's still one of the best-looking games on the platform. Now let's hop over to Tears of the Kingdom. Much like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom targets 30 frames per second and runs docked at 1600 by 900 or 900p. We don't have portable resolution numbers just yet, but given the matching profile everywhere else, I think it's safe to bet on 720p. Based on the shots I've tested thus far, I've seen no evidence of dynamic resolution scaling in docked mode, but that being said, given that dynamic scaling was present but somewhat rare in the original game, I'd say there's a reasonable chance that it's still in place here. There may be a pass of some light post-process anti-aliasing at play, but it's extremely subtle, so edge pixels are pretty obvious in most instances. So, how does it actually run? Well, actually quite well, it seems. The vast majority of the admittedly limited footage I had access to for testing came in at a consistent 30 frames per second. Even with the camera angled to see the entire original map of Breath of the Wild looming in the background, the frame rate didn't falter. In fact, the only place where I was able to spot a consistent momentary drop was when activating one of Link's new powers. This likely has to do with the sudden burst of alpha effects that fill the screen. We see similar results when Steve attaches a bomb flower to his arrow and causes a massive explosion. In both cases, this may actually be a combo of both alpha effects filling the frame, along with a bunch of physics calculations suddenly being called for all at once. It's not surprising we'd get a momentary drop in these sorts of scenarios. But beyond that, performance seems consistent, even during what I'd suspect would be very demanding moments. Link riding this contraption doesn't seem to cause problems, neither does dropping onto the Sky Islands. While we don't have footage of it, Steve also mentioned that dropping off of a Sky Island back to the surface also didn't seem to show any noticeable hit to performance, which is legitimately impressive given the sheer number of LODs that would need to be swapped out quickly in such an instance. I will note that the cloud system that was initially thought to be volumetric by many appears to be a simple series of 2D alphas with masks to imitate cloud shape evolution. It is still, of course, an entirely new system compared to the flat skybox of Breath of the Wild. Beyond that, it looks that we've maintained all of the graphical effects from Breath of the Wild. Shadows remain entirely dynamic, with no evidence of pre-baked shadows. Shadow resolution itself appears to be similar to the quality seen in Breath of the Wild. Likewise, screen space ambient occlusion is still in place and looks great, as does that foliage. Now, at first glance, you might be disappointed that Tears of the Kingdom appears to take on a very similar profile to its predecessor with minimal technical improvements. But that would be somewhat of a misunderstanding of the results we're presenting here. Tears of the Kingdom looks to significantly amplify the scale of the previous game. Yes, the overworld itself is a modified version of what we saw in Breath of the Wild, but when you take into account the additional overworld floating in the sky, the amount of world geometry on screen at any time is bumped up significantly. Add to that more demanding physics calculations called for by the new building and vehicle systems, and the metrics we're seeing become actually pretty impressive. Steve also noted that the draw distance seemed noticeably better, and I'll be eager to investigate that once I can get true like-for-like footage with Breath of the Wild. But that's all we have for this first look at the tech behind Tears of the Kingdom. Once again, a huge thank you to Steve Bowling and the entire team at Good Vibes Gaming for allowing us to make use of their footage. Be sure to check out Steve's full preview on their YouTube channel. I'll link it both in the description and at the end of this video. If you did enjoy this video, consider subscribing and checking out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. If you'd like to chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related, you can hop into our Discord using the link in the description. If you want to get a hold of me specifically, feel free to reach out on Twitter using the handle on screen. My name's John Reardon, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video is made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.